So much for checking out my show. Really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. Really appreciate all the support. It's actually early in the morning when I'm taping this. I'm in the airport, I'm on the move, actually working on a couple of new Nancy Guthrie stories. But in this episode, really interesting, I am digging into a couple of things. I'm talking to famed profiler, FBI profiler, Jim Clemente. First of all, he has a really detailed analysis of the blood spatter that was outside Nancy Guthrie's house. An analysis in a way that I haven't seen before, which I think you're gonna find really interesting, and it really tells a story, he says. Also, what is the suspect or suspects in the Nancy Guthrie case? What are they thinking now? What sort of behavior are they exhibiting now, more than 2 months after the abduction? And how could that help people know what to look for in terms of tracking them down? Jim Clemente always just has such interesting analysis of these kinds of things because of his experience with the FBI as a profiler. I'm talking to him and getting into all of it.
The frame is frozen. On the screen, a close-up of a porch. Concrete. Familiar. The kind of surface you walk across 100 times without ever thinking about it.
I wanted to start with you because with what you have been looking at with the blood spatter patterns, because I know you went back and analyzed the video that we were able to take up on the front porch area of Nancy's house. What stood out to you?
Well, first of all, it was great to actually get the video itself so I could do it frame by frame and then isolate some images, because blood spatter evidence, mainly because of the viscosity of blood, the nature of blood, tells us a story, and it is frozen in time. It's a particular moment in time that this happened. But if you look at the first image where there's two distinct blood spatter patterns, first of all, there are some very clear indications from that image. And on the one that's more in the center of the screen, you can see some larger droplets of blood and then some smaller droplets of blood. And then to the right of that, you see what looks like a smear pattern. And that is somebody disturbing blood that has already been transplanted onto that surface. So, like I said, it tells a story. But if you then go to, so as an overview, these two spatter patterns happen very close in time, right? And they indicate some action that happened in the middle of them. So you can go to the next picture. This is an image of, a still image of this, a little bit of a close-up of that center pattern that we saw in the top of the last screen. And this tells me a number of things, and it's very specific. One is that at this point, Nancy her face was very close to the ground, within a foot of the ground. And this could be either she was on her knees and hunched over, or just hunched over, or actually laying on the ground. But it looks less like she was laying on the ground, but more like hunched over this spot. And the reason I can tell you that is because some of these are low velocity blood spatters, and some are medium velocity blood spatters.
But this researcher is thinking about it. He is going frame by frame, stopping, enlarging, tilting his head at angles that make the image speak. The droplets are small. Some of them are oblong, stretched in the direction they were traveling when they hit. Some of them are circular. But look closely at those circular ones. They are not solid. They are hollow. Rings. The center has collapsed because there was air inside the blood. Bubbles. And bubbles burst. There is only one way you see bubbles in blood spatter. Only one mechanism that introduces air into blood before it leaves the body that way. The person was coughing. And they were coughing with their face within a foot of the ground. An 84-year-old woman was on her knees on her own front porch. In the middle of the night. And the blood she coughed onto that concrete is the last physical record we have of exactly where she was and exactly what was done to her. Her name is Nancy Guthrie. And she fought back. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now. Every update in this case comes to this channel first. And if you are watching from outside the US, Drop your location in the comments below. We want to know where this story is reaching. Hit like so this investigation reaches more people who need to see it. There is a fear that lives underneath the ordinary. It does not announce itself. It hides in the quiet moments. The sound of a house settling at night. The shadow at the edge of a parking lot. The instinct that something is wrong before your conscious mind can name it. Most of us push that fear back down. We tell ourselves we are safe. We tell ourselves that the doors are locked. That the alarm is on. That nothing like that happens here. Nancy Guthrie had lived in her home for years. A woman who had built a life, raised a daughter, watched that daughter become one of the most recognizable faces in American television. The kind of life that looks, from the outside, like evidence that things work out. That goodness is rewarded. That the world, despite everything, is fundamentally safe. Her daughter is Savannah Guthrie. You know that name. Most of America knows that name. And for the people who came to know Nancy through her daughter, there was a version of this woman that felt familiar. A mother. A presence. A life deeply lived. But on a night that the neighbors would later describe as completely ordinary, the illusion shattered. No one forced the front door. No window was broken. No alarm tripped. The house, from the inside, gave almost nothing away. No signs of a struggle in the bedroom. Nothing taken from the drawers. No ransacked shelves. Just a bed that had been slept in. And a back door, propped open, that should have been closed. That detail matters. And we will come back to it. What happened between the moment Nancy was taken from her bed and the moment she appeared on that front porch, we do not know with certainty. But retired FBI profiler Jim Clemente has spent his career reading the language of crime scenes. And when he was given access to the video footage taken outside Nancy's home, he went frame by frame. He isolated stills. He analyzed angles and velocity and the way individual droplets elongate in flight. And he told a story. The story starts with control. Whoever entered that house controlled Nancy from her bedroom. Clemente believes a weapon was used. That she was threatened. That she moved under duress, down through her own home, toward the front door. She complied because compliance felt like survival. Because when someone points a weapon at you in the dark, in your own house, every instinct you have is telling you to do what they say. But then something shifted. At the threshold. At the edge of the only world she knew. Something inside Nancy Guthrie made a decision. She understood, in a way that happens in the body before it happens in the mind, that going through that door was not going to save her. That wherever this person was taking her was worse than here. That this moment, right now, was the last moment she would have any power at all. She fought back. A retired FBI agent with decades of experience looked at the blood on that porch and told us what happened next. She was punched. Directly in the face. With enough force to drop her to her knees. With enough force to make her cough blood onto the ground, her face less than a foot from the concrete, her body hunched forward, the impact still reverberating through her chest. She was 84 years old. Let that land for a moment. Stay with us. We are going deeper into this evidence in a way you have not heard before. Subscribe if you have not. And keep watching. Jim Clemente spent years at the FBI. He has analyzed crime scenes that most people will never be asked to think about. And when he talks about blood spatter, he does not talk about it the way it gets talked about on television. He talks about viscosity. About the physics of a liquid with a specific density hitting a surface at a specific angle. About what low velocity looks like versus medium versus high. About what it means when the geometry of a stain tells you the position of a human body at a precise moment in time. He walked us through the images frame by frame. 2 distinct blood spatter patterns on that porch. Close together. Happening within a narrow window of time. One of them featuring larger droplets that likely dripped down after the impact. One of them featuring those hollow ring shapes, the bubbles, the ones that only appear when blood is coughed out with air still moving through it. In the first pattern, you can see directionality. Smaller droplets, oblong, stretched in the direction they were traveling. Some moving slightly to the right. That tells you the body was positioned to the left. Toward the front door. Head turned down and slightly away. Face nearly parallel with the ground. Coughing. In the second pattern, a smear. Something disturbed the blood after it landed. A foot. A knee. A body part making contact with blood that had already been deposited. Someone stepping through the evidence without realizing or without caring that they were leaving a record. And then the blood stops. No trail down the walkway. No drops continuing toward the street. Nothing. It simply ends. Clemente's interpretation of that silence is chilling. After Nancy was knocked to the ground and coughed that blood onto the porch, she was picked up, lifted, carried. And because she was being carried face up, gravity could no longer pull blood from her wounds toward the ground. The evidence trail ended because she was no longer walking. She was already gone. One offender. Clemente is confident. If there had been two, you would expect one to have maintained control throughout. There would not have been a moment where Nancy was on her knees. Two people do not lose control of an 84-year-old woman at the same time. But one person, managing a threat and a victim simultaneously in the dark, on a porch, with a timeline, with nerves, with everything that can go wrong going wrong, one person creates exactly this kind of chaos. This kind of evidence. One person. Almost certainly male. Almost certainly not a professional. The backpack appeared in surveillance footage. A Walmart backpack with reflective strips on the straps. Distinctive. The kind of thing that stands out precisely because it was chosen not to. This person thought they were being smart. But smart criminals do not buy their equipment at a specific chain store with specific inventory records. Smart criminals do not wear a fabric mask that sheds hairs and distributes DNA with every step they take. Smart criminals do not send ransom notes to local television stations. Sending notes to the media is the opposite of what an experienced kidnapper does. The moment the media is involved, law enforcement is involved. The moment law enforcement is involved, the clock starts running on everything. Evidence gets collected. Tips get called in. Surveillance footage gets reviewed. The case becomes a machine with 1,000 moving parts, all of them closing in. An experienced kidnapper understands that secrecy is survival. You communicate only with the family. You minimize every exposure point. You collect the ransom at the moment of maximum control and you disappear before anyone can close in. This person did none of that. 2 ransom notes. Both sent to Arizona television stations. A Bitcoin account attached. A mechanism that actually could have worked, that actually could have allowed an anonymous transaction with no physical exchange point, and they never followed through. They sent the notes. They waited. And when someone on the other side finally deposited funds and sent a message, "We are ready to talk, contact us," they went silent. Jim Clemente does not think that silence was strategy. He thinks it was tragedy. He thinks that by the time that message was sent, by the time the family or the FBI made that first move toward communication, there was nothing left to communicate about. He said it quietly. He said he believed Nancy had passed away by then. That the reason no one ever replied was not fear. Not caution. Not negotiation strategy. It was that the thing they were negotiating over was already gone. If you have been following this case, we need you to share this video right now. The more people who see this analysis, the more pressure on whoever did this. Subscribe. Hit like. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. This story is reaching people everywhere, and that matters. There is a question that gets asked in cases like this and it almost never gets answered cleanly. Why? Not just why did this happen, but why this person? Why this house? Why this family? The financial motive makes a kind of terrible sense. Savannah Guthrie is a public figure with a public salary and a public profile. Anyone who wanted to find a connection between significant wealth and a vulnerable, elderly person living alone would not have had to look far. Nancy Guthrie was that connection. And whoever did this knew it. But Clemente raises something else. Something that sits underneath the financial theory and complicates it. The stalking motive. There is a specific psychological profile for people who fixate on public figures. They build a fantasy. They construct an interior relationship that has no basis in reality. They believe, in some distorted corner of their mind, that if they could just get the right kind of attention, if they could make this person see them, feel something because of them, the fantasy would become real. And when that attention never comes, when the silence from the person they are fixated on continues day after day and week after week, the fantasy curdles into something else. Into anger. Into escalation. Sending ransom notes to television stations is not the behavior of a criminal trying to stay invisible. It is the behavior of someone who wants to be seen. Who wants their actions to have weight in the life of the person they are fixated on. Who watches the press conferences. Who watches the tears. Who has, in some deeply broken way, accomplished the only thing they actually wanted. To make Savannah Guthrie stop everything and pay attention. Clemente believes the connection to this family likely came through proximity. A worker. A service person. A delivery. An Uber. Someone who interacted with Nancy, saw the house, understood the connection, and began building a plan. Not a sophisticated plan. Not the plan of someone who had done this before. The plan of someone who thought they understood more than they did. Who made mistake after mistake and still went through with it because the motivation, whatever its true shape, was powerful enough to override the fear. There is a specific kind of grief that comes with not knowing. Savannah Guthrie went back to work. She appeared on camera. She made the only kind of statement anyone can make when the ground has been ripped away and the case is still open and the person responsible is still free. She kept going. Because what else do you do? Clemente has sat with families in that specific kind of limbo. Cases that stretched for years. For decades. The ones where there is no body to bury and no verdict to absorb and no clean ending to build a life around. He has seen families destroyed by that uncertainty. And he has seen others find a way to carry it. To turn it into advocacy. Into action. Into something that at least points outward instead of collapsing inward. He talks about victim services. About counseling. Not in the abstract, mandatory way those words sometimes get offered, but with the weight of someone who has watched people try to survive this without help and fail. The trauma of what happened to the Guthrie family does not end with an arrest. It does not end with a conviction. It lives in the body. It lives in the silence between the moments that look normal from the outside. Savannah Guthrie is a lawyer. She covered crime for court TV. She understands the system from the inside in a way that most families never do. And Clemente acknowledges that people who know the system sometimes have the hardest time with the parts of it that are slow. The investigations that do not close on a television timeline. The evidence that needs to be processed and interpreted and matched against databases that take time. The frustration of knowing, professionally, how long these things take, while emotionally needing them to be over yesterday. That tension is its own kind of wound. Here is what a retired FBI profiler believes is happening right now. The person who did this is watching. Every headline. Every update. Every new piece of analysis that reaches the public. He is watching because he cannot stop. Because even if part of him wants distance, the other part of him needs to know what they know. Needs to measure the gap between what he did and what can be proven. Needs to feel, moment by moment, whether the walls are closing. He has likely changed his appearance. His hair. His beard. Possibly his vehicle. Possibly his location. The kind of surface-level transformation that feels protective but does not actually erase what needs to be erased. He may have gone somewhere with a reason that sounds plausible. A family visit. A work obligation. An emergency that conveniently required him to be somewhere else. Clemente says that amateur offenders, and the evidence strongly suggests this was an amateur, experience a particular kind of paranoia after the fact. Not the cold calculation of someone who has done this before and knows how to manage the exposure. The raw, escalating panic of someone who has crossed a line they cannot uncross and who now has to live inside the consequences of that forever. He will make more mistakes. He may already be making them. Behavioral changes that the people around him are noticing. Things he says that do not quite fit. The strange new urgency to establish where he was on a certain night. The conversations he has volunteered that he did not need to have. Forensic genetic genealogy has broken open cases that were closed for 40 years. DNA from a discarded mask, from a backpack handle, from hairs left on a fabric face covering that should never have been worn in the first place, can be run through public genealogy databases. Can find cousins. Can find family trees. Can narrow to a name. Clemente is confident. He says that the mistakes made before, during, and after this crime are the architecture of capture. That this person will be found. That the question is not if but when. We want to pause for a moment and say something directly. If you know something about this case, you know who you are. You may be holding information you have convinced yourself does not matter. A conversation that seems strange. A story that did not add up. Someone who disappeared around that time. Someone who started behaving differently. Someone who had a connection to this family, however tangential, however small. You may think the detail is too minor. You may be afraid of what comes next if you speak up. You may be protecting someone you are not sure deserves protecting anymore. The FBI is working this case. The tip lines are open. Anonymous reporting is possible. And the detail you are sitting on right now may be the one that closes the distance between this crime and justice for Nancy Guthrie. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video with anyone who follows this case or lives in the area. Every view is a potential witness. Every share is a wider net. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We are tracking how far this is reaching. There is a larger question underneath all of this. Not a legal question. Not an investigative one. Something older and harder to answer. What does it mean that a person can walk into the home of an 84-year-old woman in the middle of the night, threaten her with a weapon, control her through her own house, and when she refuses at the door, when she makes the choice that her only power is in fighting back, what does it mean that the response to that courage is a punch to the face? Clemente puts it simply. It tells you about motivation. It tells you that there was a goal, and the goal was not going to be abandoned because an elderly woman was brave enough to resist. Whatever this person wanted, they wanted it more than they cared about the human being standing in front of them. That is not a legal category. That is a moral one. And it stays with you. Most of us, if we imagine ourselves in that situation, if we imagine ourselves planning something like this and then standing in front of an 84-year-old woman who looks us in the eye and says no, we cannot finish the sentence. We cannot imagine following through. The human reality of the person in front of you would become impossible to override. But some people override it. And understanding that a human being can do this, that the capacity for this level of disconnection from another person's humanity exists in the world, is part of what makes cases like Nancy Guthrie's so hard to put down. So impossible to look away from. Because she deserves better than to become a cautionary tale. She deserves to become the story that got solved. The case that resulted in an arrest, a trial, a verdict, and a reckoning. And the people who are working this investigation deserve every resource and every piece of information that can get them there. The blood on that porch is still evidence. It is still speaking. A retired FBI profiler can look at it frame by frame and tell you within a foot where Nancy Guthrie's face was. Can tell you the mechanism of injury. Can tell you the direction of movement and the position of her body and the sequence of events in those final seconds before she was picked up and carried away. The evidence does not go cold. DNA does not decay into silence. Public genealogy databases grow every single month. Behavioral patterns continue to surface. The distance between a crime and its resolution is not infinite. It is a function of information and time. We will keep reporting on this case as long as it remains open. Every development, every piece of new analysis, every thread that connects to something actionable. If this is your first time on this channel, subscribe right now. We cover this case like no one else covers it. We talk to the people who understand the evidence. We go frame by frame. We ask the questions that do not have comfortable answers. And we do not stop. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from? What do you think happened? What detail in this case keeps you up at night? For Nancy Guthrie, who was 84 years old, who fought back at her own front door, who deserved to see the morning. We are not done.